professor of law from the Delhi University, and she has authored papers and she has made presentations in many intellectual forums. And today she's going to be making a presentation followed with her comments and a short presentation of her views on right to education and the role of education in a democracy.
Good evening to all of you. I would like to first begin by thanking INBA for giving me this opportunity, and to Mr. Kaviraj. I really do not know how many people are really interested in this topic, but I think it's a very, very important topic because, especially on a law day, talking of role of education in a participative democracy is, I think, of utmost importance. I am going to basically put my presentation in three parts. First, I'm going to give you some statistics about education scenario in India, then what I understand of democracy, and how is democracy to be interlinked with education, or what is the role of education in democracy. Well, recently, I think we must have all read, there was a report which was released by UNESCO, that is the Education for All Global Monitoring Report 2014, and it showed that India has the largest illiterate adult population in the world, right? Now that makes 37% of global illiterates. Now this is a huge number of illiterates that we have in India, and this looks like that out of around 781 millions, we have 287 million Indian people who are illiterate. There is no doubt, if you look at literacy levels in India, that it has risen in the country. And if we look at, though this is an old statistics, it rose from 48% in 1991 to 63% in 2006. But the biggest problem is that this percentage rise has been negated by the number of population that has increased. So therefore, though in percentages there is a rise, but in number of population, it almost remains to be static. So there are two problems that we have to tackle simultaneously. That is the twin problem of education growth, that is the positive growth that we talk about, and the negative growth in the population. Now, if you look at the second important thing is that if you look at the literacy rate statistics, the total literacy rate in 2011 was 74.04, which looks to be a decent percentage, right? But I think it is not, because 1/3 of the population still remains to be illiterate. But if you look at the split between the males and the females, it will be found out that male literacy rate is 82.14, whereas for females it is just 46%. Now that is a gap of 35% which we have to achieve. And it is not this gap of 35% between the two genders, but even the overall literacy problem that we have to basically face. Now if you look at, that means quantitatively it must have increased, but qualitatively the problem of learning, the problem of education still is a problem. Now there are two things. I think the first level that we have to achieve is the quantitative growth, and the second level along with the quantitative is we must look at the qualitative growth of education. Nowadays I think a lot of private institutions are coming up. There is a lot of criticism, especially if you go to the government universities like ours. People have a lot of criticism against these private universities and private schools coming up. But I think they're also playing a lot of, a social responsibility being taken up, in the sense that those who have not been able to make up in the government institutions, there are private institutions with much better infrastructure who are offering education to the country. Why is education important? Is it important only when we talk in the Indian scenario, or even at the international level? Now, at the international level, if you look at, there is this Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is saying that we must grant education to everyone. And when we have to grant education to everyone, the problem which arises is, what is the situation in India? In India, we all know that right to education has become a fundamental right. And after having become a fundamental right, there is a Right to Education Act also, which came in 2009 and which has also been implemented, it has come into force. But a lot of law people sitting here. The other day I was talking in one of the conferences where people from Bar Council were also present. And it was it came to our notice, not something new, that there are so many law colleges in existence in the country which are only on paper. You know, I was feeling aghast. What does that mean, only on paper? That means that it is there only on the paper. There is no machinery, there is no infrastructure, there is no manpower which is working. So where is the money going? Where is everything going? These are important questions that we have to deal with. Just because we have a right to primary education that is only up to the age of 14 years, that is the one level. The second level is higher education. We have to achieve both the levels. And if at both the levels there are institutions only on paper, I think it'll be a very, very difficult situation to handle everything. So what becomes imperative for the time being for the government basically is that it should value and it should devote resources to education just as they strive to defend their citizens. So defense mechanism is important, but so is education, which is important. Now, why am I talking about? Because so much about education. Can we correlate it with democracy? What is the meaning of democracy? I think the moment we open our eyes in the school, everybody tells us to learn this. Government of the people, by the people, for the people. Now, we all know this by heart. But do we really know it by heart and by brain, what it means? If we say government of the people, if people are uninformed, they cannot make their informed choices. They do not have knowledge. They do not have awareness. They do not know what kind of rights do they have. Can they really form the government? That's one big question. It's people, it's by the people. Just because you go and cast the vote, and that too, we know that the way votes are bought and the way votes are sold, that does not mean that we really have a democracy by the people. Now, as far as for the people is concerned, that I think I would leave, because we are having democracy for the people for last so many years since 1947. But our issue today is to have democracy, government of the people and by the people. And this basically means that the supreme power has to be vested in the people. Now, what do you mean by supreme power being vested in the people? This can only happen when we can institutionalize freedom. According to me, I don't talk of democracy by, for, of, and so on and so forth. For me, democracy is institutionalization of freedom. Now, when I talk of institutionalization of freedom, what it basically means is freedom of women from men, freedom of labor from management, freedom of citizens from illiteracy, and the exploited from the exploiters. And the biggest thing that is important is it is the freedom of people from starvation deaths. Every day we hear it is either because of hunger, where we have a right to food, it is because you're not educated, we have a right to education, you have a right to freedom of speech and expression given in the fundamental rights, yet we do not know what our views are. How can we form our views when we don't even understand what the society basically looks like? Every day, whether it is winters or it is summers or it is monsoons, people are dying because they are homeless. So there are two things which I think which are most important today are, we all talk about human rights, but do we really have a right to be human? How many of us lead a life of a human? We do lead a life of a Homo sapien, that is a physical being that you're talking about. But to become a human, we have to get freedom from starvation, from pollution-related diseases. Every day you read nowadays, and all of us who have children at home and old people at home, we know that it is so difficult even to go for morning walk. Since generations, people have been telling us, go for morning walk, it is good for your health. And today the doctors are telling us, don't go for a morning walk because it is bad for health. So what kind of freedom are we talking about? What kind of democracy are we talking about? Unless and until we really get into these issues, I think political democracy has no meaning at all, because political democracy stands for every individual understanding the rights that are being given to them. I was reading a few books, when they asked me, when Mr. Kaviraj asked me, why don't you speak on this? So I thought, let me just, since look at various situations and find out what are the various pillars of democracy. Beautiful figure that you find out, and it says sovereignty of the people. Sovereignty of the people who are uninformed. Government based upon consent of the governed. How is the consent given? We all know how the consent is given and by whom the consent is given. Majority rule, this is very good because majority rule with minority rights. So what do? We like badshahs, with kings, the majority is protecting the minority. And who this minority is, that's again a one big huge question. There is guarantee of basic human rights. If you're not even having a right to be human, what kind of protection of human rights are we talking about? Free and fair elections, that I would like to put it in quotes, I don't want to comment on that. Good, the minister is still not here. Equality before the law. And there's a beautiful saying which says, equality before law, equality begins with difference. I think we've all heard about that because there's something called intelligible differentia. So when there is an intelligible differentia, so what do? You've got two different groups, and within two different classes, there should be, so classification is permitted, but within classes, what should happen is, that should not be, there should be no discrimination. So good for us. So what do? We have the informed class and we have the uninformed class. We have the unaware class and we've got the aware class. We've got the knowledgeable people and we've got those people who have no knowledge at all. So therefore, there is equality begins with difference. So is that the kind of equality are we talking about? That's a huge question mark that we have. And the others, due process of law, values of tolerism, pragmatism, etc. I'm not going to read out all to you. Having said so, let us find out what kind of a legal system are we having. We have doctrine of separation of powers. There is the legislature which is legislating, there is the judiciary which is adjudicating, and all of us standing before the judiciary and giving them the facts that we want to give to them. And what kind of a system do we have? Judges have to look at the facts which are being given to them by the advocates. So here I would like to make an appeal. Academicians always are not liked for this purpose. I would like to make an appeal to the advocates. Rather than having manipulated facts and giving them before the judges, it would be much better if we give the facts as they are to the judges so that we can have a just system. Anyway, I do not know how much of meaning or weight that would lead to. Rule of law is a doctrine which is being followed completely in our country. And cases after cases, we are saying rule of law is the basic structure of the Constitution, and rule of law means equality before law and equal protection of laws. Now, both the phrases, with the unaware, with the uninformed, with the uneducated, what does it mean? One has still to wonder with respect to it. Right to education, again a fundamental right which I've talked about, so I'm not going to touch upon it. So what does judiciary do? We have got all these legislations. We've got everything in place. We've got a wonderful constitution. So what do? Now we have to find out, there are two sets of people. One is the entire country which has the right to equality. We all have the rights. So we are all the possessors of the rights. If we all possess rights, then where is the problem? The problem is how many of us are in a position to exercise our rights. So there is a difference between right to possession of a right and right to exercise of a right. So judiciary thought, let's provide certain solutions. Now what has judiciary done? It has digressed from the well-settled principles of law. And how has it digressed? Let's take the first example of public interest litigation, to which judges are now giving different names. They're saying, let's have public interest litigation and not private interest litigation. Let's have public interest litigation and not publicity interest litigation, because what are various people doing? They're just for publicity. All right, I will. So what we do is, the solutions which have to be provided by the judges is that it is basically they have digressed. As I said, the first thing is the concept of locus standi has been increased. Secondly, fundamental rights in 1955, it was said that fundamental rights cannot be waived, and it still continues to be so. But what is the situation? Do you know what is the meaning of a right? Right means the basic aspect of choice of invoking, not invoking, or waiving. So what do? There's another farman which is coming. Yes, sir, do I stop? Okay. I thought left, right, everybody wants me to stop. Yes, I know. So therefore, I will skip. I do not know what to say then. As far as, all right, this is education and democracy. I think what is important is that I wrap up by saying education is important for participative democracy. And in the 21st century, where both Lakshmi and Saraswati are going on together, so what is happening in knowledge economy? We need to have knowledge. Thank you so much.
Excellent bird's eye view of many of the important pillars of Indian democracy. So today I'm going to talk to you about, I'm going to be more focused and specific about one little area of the Constitution. And today is an excellent day to contemplate on it, because it was the day when in 1949 we adopted the Indian Constitution. So Indian Constitution has now introduced an amendment in which, in the chapter on fundamental rights, they have said right to education is a fundamental right, but it will be provided through legislation in the manner the state chooses. So that is the catch-all phrase. So they said you're having this fundamental right, but it will be something that we will decide the nature of it, the manner of it. So, you see, I must tell you, let me take you back. Even before it became a fundamental right, the courts recognized the right to education as the most important right of all rights, because they said without right to education, all other rights are without meaning or purpose. So even before the constitutional amendment was brought about, they said fundamental right to education is there. They read it into Article 21 of the Constitution. And then came, this was in 1992, quick on the heels of this judgment, came another judgment in 1993 when they proclaimed the right to education and said this is part of Article 21. So in 93, this right was crystallized by the court. It was almost thrust down the throats of the parliament and the government. Now, I want to take you to a little bit of history to see things in perspective. You see, at the time when the constitution makers